The first time the cops came, I thought it was a misunderstanding. The fifth time, I had my lawyer on speed dial and a camera crew waiting by the barn. You don't expect the HOA of a subdivision you don't even belong to, hell, one that ends half a mile from your fence line, to declare war on your farm. But that's exactly what happened when the good folks of Meadow Glen Estates decided my working livestock property was a visual blight on their $800,000 wine and cheese cookie-cutter homes. What they didn't realize was, I didn't scare easy, and I sure as hell didn't lose in court. It started simple. I bought 22 acres just outside of town, half wooded, half pasture, about 3 years ago, built a pole barn, retrofitted an old trailer while my house was under construction, fenced in some goats, and planted a few rows of heirloom tomatoes. That turned out tastier than anything from Whole Foods. I named the place Cold Creek Acres, my dream homestead. A few months later, Meadow Glen Estates started popping up like mushrooms on the other side of the hill. Someone got the idea to drop a high-end gated community beside open farmland, and some developer with no soul and a lot of cash followed through. I didn't complain. Wasn't my business what people did with their money, until they decided to make me their business. The first visit was a Tuesday. A patrol cruiser rolled up my gravel drive, kicking dust past the chicken coop. 2 officers stepped out, one younger, trying to look tough, and an older guy who clearly just wanted his shift to end. I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked over. "Afternoon, officers," I said. "You the owner of this property?" The young one asked. "Sure am. We received a complaint about illegal livestock housing and unregulated commercial activity." I blinked. "I have goats and a produce stand. That illegal now?" He looked at his clipboard. "Are you aware that your property falls under Meadow Glen Estates HOA regulations?" I laughed. Not a chuckle, a full, from-the-gut laugh. "No, sir, because it doesn't." He didn't like that. "Their board president filed an official complaint, and she can file a letter to Santa Claus, too. Doesn't make it law." After 15 minutes of me showing them property records, GIS maps, and even the original plat document from the county assessor, they left. Confused. A little embarrassed, but not before one of them muttered, "Bet this isn't over." He was right. It wasn't over. They came back 2 weeks later. This time it was a deputy from the sheriff's office, not city police. He pulled in just after sunset while I was mucking out the goat stalls. Headlights swept across the gravel, like I was on the run. The deputy stepped out cautiously, hand resting on his holster like I might lunge at him with a tomato. "Mr. Collin Brooks?" he asked. "That's me. Got a report of unlicensed firearms on the premises and possible code violations. Complaint from the Meadow Glen HOA." I stared at him. What kind of code violation involves guns and goats? He didn't answer. He just asked if I had any weapons. I gestured to the pitchfork in my hand. "Just this one, for now." I didn't invite him in, but I didn't stop him either. He took a slow walk around the property, made a show of peering into the barn and inspecting the chicken tractor like it was a meth lab. Found nothing. Left with a vague warning to be mindful of my surroundings. The next day, a certified letter arrived, sent directly from the HOA. "Dear Mr. Brooks, despite your refusal to acknowledge jurisdiction, Meadow Glen Estates is a covenant-protected neighborhood committed to upholding a standard of aesthetic integrity and property value. Your visible structures, equipment, and livestock pose a nuisance to the adjacent properties. We respectfully request you remove unsightly debris, relocate animals away from the shared line of sight, and cease unlicensed sales activity." I reread the letter 3 times before setting it on fire in my grill. Then I called my lawyer. Her name was Danielle Cho, tough as nails and twice as sharp. When I explained the situation, she gave a low whistle. They actually said refusal. "To acknowledge jurisdiction?" she asked, word for word. "They have no legal authority outside of their boundary," she said. "None, not even on a good day. Send me everything." So I did. Every letter, every officer's business card, even a copy of my drone footage showing the Meadow Glen entrance sign, a solid half-mile past my mailbox. Her response: "Let them keep pushing. We'll be ready." Visit number 3 came with backup, 2 cop cars, 1 code enforcement officer, a clipboard guy in khakis who looked like he failed out of architecture school. They said there were multiple confirmed reports that my goats were disturbing the peace. At the time, my goats were literally sleeping. One of them, Beanie, had his head stuck in a feed bucket. I asked if the reports had come from anyone. Not affiliated with the HOA, none had. The code enforcement officer, a guy named Travis, seemed embarrassed to even be there. I gave him a tour, showed him the tags, the feeding logs, the vet certificates. Everything was clean, legal, permitted. Still, they issued a notice of potential municipal conflict, citing the presence of a compost pile within 300 feet of a property line. It wasn't even a regulation, it was a guideline, but it was clear Meadow Glen was trying to build a paper trail. Danielle sent another letter. This one was less friendly. Cease and desist all contact with Mr. Brooks or be held liable for harassment, misuse of government resources, defamation, and trespassing via legal proxy. The HOA president responded through a law firm out of state. They claimed easement rights, neighborhood harmony, and even suggested I was lowering property values just by engaging in agricultural behavior visible from public roads. Agricultural behavior. I framed that line on my fridge. By the time the 4th visit happened, I had installed cameras on every corner of the property. I'd filed 3 separate complaints with the sheriff's department. I'd documented every ridiculous HOA attempt to overreach their bounds. Danielle was prepping a formal injunction, and I had stopped pretending to be polite. The HOA's argument, from what we could piece together, boiled down to this: their Phase 2 expansion included a parcel of land that hadn't been developed, yet land that bordered mine. They were arguing that future planned expansion gave them a say in how I used my land now, which was insane. But they kept coming. So I made a decision. I walked into the county courthouse, filed paperwork for an official harassment suit against the Meadow Glen HOA, its board president, and their law firm. I wasn't just defending anymore. I was going on offense. Danielle filed an additional civil suit for damages, emotional distress, lost produce sales from weeks of disrupted customers, and public defamation. "Make it loud," I told her. And she did. Within a week, the local news picked it up. Farmer claims HOA harassment, despite not being a member. They interviewed me standing in front of my chicken coop. Echo clucked in the background as I held up the stack of citations like fan mail. The HOA president refused to comment. But that didn't stop the firestorm, because suddenly, every other landowner in the area with a fence touching a subdivision started wondering if they were next. Danielle's inbox exploded. We had momentum, and I was just getting warmed up. By the time the 5th police visit happened, I had 3 news crews on call, 2 lawsuits pending, and a fresh batch of goat cheese cooling in the fridge. I was over it, done playing neighborly. This time, it wasn't just a patrol car. It was 3 units, lights on but no sirens, like they wanted a show but didn't want to wake the Meadow Glen brunch crowd. The lead officer was new, young, nervous, clearly didn't want to be here. The others stood back, arms crossed, like they knew better. "Sir," he said, adjusting his belt, "we've received reports of unpermitted structures and illegal waste disposal." I pointed behind me. "That's a rain barrel, and that's a compost heap. Both legal, both pre-approved by county code." He paused. "There's also been a complaint about aggressive animals." I whistled. Beanie the goat trotted over, lazily chewing on alfalfa. He head-butted my leg gently, then laid down in the grass. "Behold the terror," I said, deadpan. The officer cracked a smile before catching himself. "Mind if we take a look around?" Only if you have a warrant. He didn't. They left. 20 minutes later, muttering about false leads and wasting resources. I handed them a stack of printed copies of my property lines and permits, just for fun. After they pulled away, I called Danielle. "That makes 5, I said. "Good," she replied. "That's our magic number." She filed an emergency injunction the next morning, citing a pattern of targeted harassment, abuse of public resources, and defamation of character. We requested a temporary restraining order against the HOA and a cease order preventing any board, member or agent from initiating contact without direct legal cause. Then we served it in person. At the Meadow Glen HOA quarterly meeting, Danielle wore heels and a navy pantsuit like she was walking into the Supreme Court. I wore my dirtiest jeans and a shirt that read, "Goats Before Gates." They were sitting in a semicircle of collapsible chairs in the community clubhouse when we walked in. Karen Grayson, the president, was mid-sentence about aesthetic consistency when she froze at the sight of Danielle's legal folder. Karen recovered quickly. "Excuse me, this is a private meeting." Danielle raised the envelope. "You've been served." There was a beautiful silence, followed by the rustle of paper as the board opened their copies. "You're being sued for harassment libel and interference with lawful business operations," Danielle said, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "Additionally, you violated state statutes by misrepresenting jurisdiction and issuing false complaints to law enforcement. The full hearing is scheduled in 3 weeks." Karen turned red. "This is outrageous. He's a public nuisance. His property is a mess. My property is none of your jurisdiction," I cut in. "But you're welcome to explain your position to the judge. I'd love to hear how you plan to justify sending police to my farm 5 times without cause." Someone in the back, one of the newer board members, started laughing. Karen stood and slammed her folder shut. "You'll regret this," I smiled. "See you in court." The courthouse was packed, not just with lawyers and reporters, but with locals, farmers, homesteaders, even a few Meadow Glen residents who wanted to watch Karen squirm. The room buzzed with low murmurs until the bailiff called it to order. Presented first, Danielle laid it out like a clean field row, verified property records proving I was not, and had never been, under HOA jurisdiction, copies of every HOA complaint, footage of every police visit, witness statements from responding officers saying they found no violations, and best of all, public statements from the HOA board's internal emails, leaked by a disgruntled member, describing a strategy to pressure Mr. Brooks into compliance or relocation. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Torres, didn't even blink. She let Karen's lawyer, some puffed-up guy in loafers, try to spin it as civic concern. "What authority do you believe the HOA had to act outside its boundaries?" she asked. "The proximity of Mr. Brooks's land posed a direct visual and economic impact on our subdivision," the lawyer said. "Do you understand that's not how jurisdiction works?" She replied. By the time we finished, the courtroom air was thick with anticipation. Karen's lawyer threw up a half-baked counterclaim about damaged community reputation, but the judge didn't buy it. She ruled decisively. The HOA's complaints were unfounded. The repeated police calls were abusive. Their communications were defamatory. Their attempted enforcement outside of their boundary line was unlawful. Then came the best part. Damages awarded: $75,000 in economic loss, $25,000 in emotional distress, $10,000 in punitive damages, and a permanent injunction preventing the HOA or any future affiliate from contacting me or filing third-party complaints without a judge's sign-off. $110,000 in 1 day. ChatGPT said, "Here's part 4, the final installment of HOA sent cops to My farm 5 times. I'm not a member, but I took them to court and won big, bringing the full story to roughly 4,000 words. Let's bring this showdown to a satisfying close. News of the verdict spread faster than a summer wildfire. By the time I pulled into the feed store the next morning, the cashier gave me a 2-finger salute and said, "Heard you made HOA cry. Feed's on the house today." My inbox was full of local journalists asking for follow-ups. People on social media tagged me in posts with headlines like "Goat Farmer Shuts Down Suburban Tyrants" and "Brooks v. HOA, Country Wins." One guy even drew a political cartoon of me as a cowboy, lassoing a massive HOA binder. I wasn't interested in fame. I was interested in freedom and accountability. For 3 straight years, all I'd wanted was to grow vegetables, raise animals, and keep to myself. And yet, the HOA had tried to shove their vision of control into my soil like they owned the deed. Now they owed me. Karen Grayson tried to appeal. Her lawyer filed a motion within a week, claiming the damages were excessive and that my response to the HOA's actions had invited public ridicule. The judge denied the appeal in less than 5 minutes and slapped an additional $2,000 in fees on top. Karen resigned from the HOA board the following Monday. No press release, no apology. Just a notice slipped under the clubhouse door and a hurried "for sale" sign in her front yard 2 days later. Rumor had it she moved to a gated community on the far side of the county, one where HOA rules were strictly internal and surrounded by 6-foot walls. Fine by me. As for Meadow Glen Estates, they folded their entire board 2 months later. The developer restructured the HOA to remove enforcement rights over anything not physically owned by the subdivision. A new resident-run committee was formed, one that focused on real issues: trash pickup, landscaping requests, block parties. People like Marvin from Lot 14 came out of the woodwork to thank me. "You scared the life out of them," he said, grinning like he'd just discovered moonshine. I poured half my settlement into the farm. New fencing, a heated barn expansion, updated irrigation for the gardens, and even a small teaching center to host school kids and local tours. The rest I invested, with a little side pot saved just in case someone else ever got any ideas. Danielle, my attorney, became a legend in the area. Other rural landowners hired her to push back on zoning board harassment and overreaching HOAs. She even started hosting free workshops called Know Your Lines, How Property Rights Protect You. At the first one, I was invited to speak. I stood in front of 50 people, some in boots, some in boat shoes, and told them the truth. I never wanted a fight, but when you force one on a man who lives off the land, don't be surprised when he digs in deeper than you can ever pull out. The room gave me a standing ovation. Still, my favorite part of all this, that quiet morning, 3 weeks after the final ruling, when I sat on my porch with Echo the rooster crowing in the distance, a fresh cup of coffee in hand, and no HOA letters in my mailbox, just peace. The land was mine again. And this time it came with a legal boundary so strong even 100 angry neighbors with matching polos couldn't cross it. Took one last look at the edge of my property, the line where my grass met the trimmed sidewalks of Meadow Glen. Then I installed a custom wood sign just inside the fence line. It read, "Private Property. We don't answer to HOAs here. Cold Creek. Acres and beneath it, just for good measure. P.S. The goats are watching."